morning, everybody. I did that. It was not a school. That sounded much more school-like than I was anticipating. It was literally just to say good morning. This might be me, but I've got an echo that's behind us. So apologies if you're getting me twice. Once is normally bad enough. Never mind twice. Shall I just carry on?
Just Sarah, there's no feedback. We've switched everything down here. Bernie, can you switch your?
Yeah,
fantastic. Thank you.
So welcome to the Shropshire Health and Wellbeing Board. You are all very welcome this morning. We've got a number of items of conversation discussion on the agenda that we'll go through, which is fantastic. As ever, would just ask that when you come in and speak, you introduce yourselves. We are live, we're streamed, and I believe we're on YouTube as well as on Teams. So I didn't realise we were going to be influencers as well in that space. The meeting is also recorded so that people can watch it back at their convenience. I am going to go through and do apologies. We'll then follow the agenda. There has been a request for a change of order in the agenda, and I'll deal with that as we get to that point. There was a clash of meetings and we wanted to make sure that people could come and present and be engaged in that conversation, so we've absolutely accommodated that. As ever, the strength in the Shropshire Health and Wellbeing Board is in the conversation and the debate and the engagement that takes place. So having partners, colleagues around the room, not that looking around any of you need encouragement to engage and join in, but the strength of the outcome of our conversations and the better the positive impact for the residents that we serve is based on the fact that we engage in the conversations and discussions. So welcome that interaction and conversation and discussion. In terms of apologies, we've received apologies from Councillor Heather Kidd, Leader of the Council, apologies from Ben Hollands, Health and Wellbeing Strategy Implementation Manager, MPUFT, apologies from Ed Hancock, Superintendent at West Mercia Police, and apologies from Claire Horsfield, Director of Ops and Chief AHP at Shropshire Community NHS Trust. Have we had any other apologies? Nope. So we'll take that as read. Reminder to members in terms of disclosing any pecuniary interests that are not already recorded in the Register of Interests. Does anyone have anything else that they wish to declare that's not already recorded? Nope. Good. Okay. Minutes of the previous meeting. These are the minutes of the Health and Wellbeing Board meeting that were on the 20th of November. Any comments in terms of accuracy of the minutes from that meeting? Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to say that the record of the minutes didn't include myself as Chair of the last Health and Wellbeing Board, but the website has been updated to confirm that. And the second thing is that at the end of the meeting, those who were here will remember that I put out a call to the members of the Health and Wellbeing Board to either take up, continue or develop a physical activity in support of health and to demonstrate our leadership with regard to public health. And so I'd be grateful if that could be recorded, and next time I may ask what people have decided to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Councillor. So with that amendment and that correction, are we happy to approve the minutes as proposed? Do I have a proposer for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Bennett, and a seconder, Claire Pop. Thank you. Okay, just before I get onto the public question time, and grateful that we have had a question from a member of the public, and John, you're going to come in and read the question. It's probably worth at this point just really quickly going around and doing introductions, if that's okay, just so that colleagues also online know who's here, as well as colleagues that are sitting in the public gallery aspect. So Simon Whitehouse, Chief Exec with NHS Shropshire, Telford and Wrexham, and NHS Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent, and co-chair the Health and Wellbeing Board.
Hello, I'm Bernie Bentic. I'm councillor for Meal electoral ward and also the portfolio holder for health and public protection at Shropshire Council.
Thank you, and I'll get my title right this time. For the purposes of the Health and Wellbeing Board, I'm a Joint Director of Public Health, working with Shropshire Council and with the ICB.
Hi, I'm Kieran Smith. I'm the Environmental Protection and Housing Enforcement Manager. I'm just here to support with the answer to public questions.
Hello, I'm Lynn Corley, Chief Officer of Healthwatch Shropshire.
Natasha Moody, Assistant Director in Children's Services for Shropshire Council.
Good morning, Ruth Houghton, Councillor for Bishop's Castle and the Portfolio Holder for Adults and Social Care.
Morning, David Crosby, Chief Officer Partners in Care.
Jackie Jeffrey, Chief Officer of Simplified Shropshire, representing the Voluntary Sector Assembly.
Good morning, everyone. I'm David Shaw. I'm Director of Children's Services at Shropshire Council.
Good morning, I'm Tanya Miles, Interim Chief Exec and Director for Adult Social Care.
Good morning, Laura Fisher, Head of Housing, Resettlement, Independent Living at Shropshire Council.
Good morning, I'm Claire Parker. I'm Director of Strategy and Development at NHS Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin.
Good morning, Nigel Lee. I'm the Director of Strategy and Partnerships at South.
Michelle Dulson, Committee Officer for Shropshire Council.
Louisa Jones, Business Support Lead for Partnerships, Shropshire Council.
Thank you very much for that, colleagues. Moving on to the public question time. So, Mr. Palmer, you're going to read the question, so please come and it's the right button when the red light comes on. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is really the agenda item 7, which is the Housing and Health Action Plan update. The outstanding progress outlined in the Housing Action Plan, which is Appendix A, is invigorating and reverberates positively, a testament to the energies, professionalism and caring attitudes of all those involved at the Council and its partners. Decent Homes 2 standard, a commitment to 90% fulfil. Housing stock now fully compliant with AWAB's law. Progress on prioritising housing for essential workers, all to be celebrated. Ahead of the Renters' Rights Act 2025 becoming law on the 1st of May, will the board be actively encouraging the Council and its partners to be alert, smart, get ready to challenge landlords at every turn and hold them to the highest standards? It's what the public across the age ranges passionately want, especially younger people, inspired in our campaigning focus by such essential books as Quadro 20 Boroughs, Our Country in Crisis, Britain's Housing Emergency, and How We Rebuild from 2024. Locally, only the left are vocal and active in pursuing positive changes in our communities. You never hear a constructive peep on these vital issues from the inarticulate, clueless morass.
Thank you for that. I'm going to invite Councillor Bentic to respond.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, John, for your question, which is really important. A working group for all the services affected by the new statutory duties and powers is actively working on preparation for implementation of the Act. New investigatory powers are already in force, and the next phase of the implementation, due in May of this year, concerns tenancy relations and anti-eviction requirements. The government has awarded the council £92,000 in new burdens funding this year to help prepare, and a business case is being worked up to restructure the housing enforcement team and bolster the tenancy relations role. The board can be assured that the council is actively planning for the implementation of all parts of the Act, and that landlords will be held to account against the new requirements as they currently are with existing legislation? Do you have a supplementary question, John?
That's great to hear. No supplementary question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, and thank you for the time for joining us this morning and for your time in submitting the question. Really appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move us on forward in terms of that. I did say there was going to be a movement in terms of the agenda. So the special education needs and disability and alternative provision agenda item that was due to come next is going to be moved towards the end of the agenda to allow the presenters to come and join us. Thank you for that, Kieran. And I'm going to ask Lynn if it's okay if we can bring the Health Watch agenda item up to the top of the agenda, and we'll deal with that now if that's okay with you, Lynn. So, Lynn, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. As I said before, I'm Lynn Cawley, Chief Officer of Health Watch Shropshire, and thank you for the opportunity for me to just update the board on the work of Health Watch Shropshire so far, but also the challenges that we face going forward. So hopefully you will have read the full paper. So this is just the key slides that I've selected for me to just go through today. You'll see in slide 1 that that's really just for anyone who's not aware of the background of Health Watch and our statutory function to understand the needs, experiences and concerns of people who use health and social care services and to speak out on their behalf. And we were set up by the Health and Social Care Act following the Frankwell report into the Mid-Staffs Foundation Trust. And for me, it's important to remember that origin because we were designed to be the local consumer voice with a key role in influencing local commissioning decisions to really give people the opportunity to share their views and experiences anonymously with an independent organisation. We also have the duty to involve the public in our work, and we do that through volunteering, but also having public meetings, but also anyone can speak to us about any issues that they're facing in their communities. We've always reported to our national body Health Watch England, which works at government level and works with the government on policy, and the CQC. And Health Watch England is a committee member of the CQC. NHS England also receive our reports, and we also provide them locally to our local ICB or NHS Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin, Shropshire Council, and of course the Health and Wellbeing Board. And it's important as well to remember that although we're this tiny little group of people sitting on Shrewsbury Business Park, we are part of a much bigger network of 152 local health watches. And one of the strengths of that health watch network is that we can identify not only regional challenges but also national challenges and try and push for change when we have that opportunity to work together. So in Health Watch Shropshire, since we came into being in 2013, we've published 120 reports sharing people's experiences of care and health services. And on top of that, we've done 80 entry and view reports, which is where we go into services with our volunteers to see what's happening on the ground and speak to people who we might not otherwise hear from. So some of the most important visits are those that we do to care homes and other accommodation for people who are vulnerable, but also people on wards in the hospitals and clinics, because one, it's about raising awareness of us, but it also gives us an opportunity to see the reality of those people, of those experiences with an independent eye. And since 2016, Health Watch Shropshire has also provided the Independent Health Complaints Advocacy Service. Not all Health Watch across the network provide this service, but the advantage of us providing it is that not only do we have the opportunity to explain to people how to make a formal complaint, but we also can give them some wider options, because a lot of people don't want to complain. They just want to be heard, and that is something that we can do as Healthwatch. And we can also make sure that they understand their rights along the way. And we don't discourage people from complaining, but we do give people an alternative. And we also try to manage their expectations, because I think everyone recognises that there are limitations within the health complaints process. So far this year, we've had 5 key priorities. Following challenges with our budget over time, which obviously increased with cost of living and the fact that our budget didn't increase over time, we've faced significant financial challenges. And the last thing we wanted to do was for that to impact on the number of people working in Healthwatch Shropshire, because we've got such a massive area to cover. So we've tried to cut corners in every other way possible. And our most recent move has to become hosted by Community Resource, which actually was the organisation when it was a Shropshire Rural Community Council that won that very first contract. So we've always had that relationship, but we've got some back office support and some much needed help when we've got a high demand for our services. We've still got volunteers, but like most charities and voluntary organisations, we're struggling to maintain them and recruit them. But we are continuing to promote our opportunities, because they are a very unique opportunity within the system for that sort of on the ground conversation with other people, so that people can feel that they're really supporting people in their communities and giving them a voice. And we are in the process of developing a community voice panel. So that will essentially become an equivalent of our board, which we've had before. And this is where we want the public to come to us and try and inform our forward plan, the priorities that we should be taking, and also steer and guide us and support us to do the work that we do. One of our key priorities has been inequalities, and I think that's probably more appropriate than ever. And some of the work that we've done around this has been speaking to people with long-term conditions, but also significant health conditions. We've spent a lot of time speaking to veterans about the impact or not of the veteran aware work that's happening across systems. But we've also been doing some quite difficult work at times, engaging with the hard to reach or the hard to hear or the hard to listen to at HMP Stoke Heath and inpatients at the Redwoods. And our most recent piece of work has been with spinal injuries, because we've been aware of some people with this experience through our ICAS service. So what we've done is try to reach out to as many people as possible to share their experiences of these services with us, because like all services, nothing is perfect and there's always room for improvement. Prevention, this is our role in terms of making sure people have information. So we support a lot of the local campaigns and to try and raise awareness amongst the public about what services are available to them. And so, for example, we've been supporting the Think Which Service campaign by the NHS since it started. And in our day-to-day work, we're still signposting people to where it would be best for them to seek out help and support, rather than always going to the same place or feeling that they're not being listened to. And then obviously a massive piece of our work is about access and quality of services. And one of the ways that we do that is by gathering this experience, we share it with the providers to make sure that it adds to the information they're receiving. And sometimes the information we get might be a little bit more challenging, because people might not feel comfortable speaking to the provider themselves, because they're concerned about the impact that might have on their future care and treatment. So For most people will be aware that in July last year, Penny Dash produced her review of patient safety across the health and social care landscape, looking at a number of organisations working across the country. And the proposal from that work was the abolition of not only Health Watch England as our national body, but all local Health Watch, with the statutory functions going to the Integrated Care Boards, or NHS, Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin, and the local authority. And the recommendation was to bring together the work of Local Health Watch and the engagement functions of integrated care boards and providers to ensure patient and wider community input into the planning and design of services. And then that report informed the new NHS 10-year plan, Fit for the Future. So hopefully you're all aware of those documents. The things that I just wanted to identify today are what we consider to be the potential risks. And this isn't just me speaking as Chief Officer of Health Watch Shropshire. These are the risks identified by the network. And it's something that we're keen as a network to really remind people of, but try and find a way forward that ensures people have a service that they need. So the things that we are concerned about is that vulnerable people who are less able to advocate for themselves will not be heard. For example, through ICAS, that's one of our key roles, is to work with people who might struggle with things like literacy, understanding, mental health, and long-term conditions. But also those people who don't really know where to go, don't know where to turn. We're also concerned that if we're not there, a lot of people will not be sharing their views and experiences, and so important issues may be missed. Providers could focus listening activities on the issues that are important to them rather than the issues that are important to the public, and this could result in increased health inequalities. A strong independent voice for patients, service users and the general public will not be heard in strategic decision making. And we're concerned that if feedback is gathered by providers in relation to their own services, no one is tasked with listening to the holistic experience of people who are experiencing care across broader pathways, and those pathways are getting broader as we move into neighbourhood working and things like that. And obviously our other concern is for things like the NHS app, where we are concerned that they may become an over-reliance on digital feedback, which means that a lot of people, and you could argue particularly a lot of people in Shropshire, might not be able to use those things, either because they don't have useful access to the internet, or they don't have the equipment, or they don't have the money. I mean, I still speak regularly to people who've got low data, who don't feel able to access the information that they would like to on their mobile phones, because a lot of people do not have a computer at home. So just this slide, I won't talk through it, but it's just to give a timeline on the work that has been done by the network. So thank you to everyone who submitted their response to the national survey about the next steps. This was never intended to be a plea for Health Watch to survive. It was never save our jobs. It was really, we had to give it that title because that's who we are, but it was all about that independent patient and public voice. So we got the over 10,000 responses required, and we got a response which confirmed the decision to abolish Health Watch. But they did commit to involving us in discussions going forward, and unfortunately to this date that has not happened. So this in the next week or so, the network is speaking to the Department of Health and Social Care to raise some questions about how they're planning to mitigate the risks that we've identified, and how we may, as a network, be involved in finding a way forward that meets the needs of everybody. So for us, the questions to consider are how, as a system, we can ensure that the public voice is heard and represented by an independent, non-political voice, and also what mechanisms will exist to manage conflicts of interest when engaging with the public about their views and experiences. Transparency, publication and engagement. We have a statutory duty to produce public reports and to share people's views and experiences in a public way. But quite often across the system, when we hear about public engagement, we might hear numbers and we might hear places, but we don't know who was in the room. We don't know exactly what was said. We will often get an overview of perspectives, but for us, every voice matters, regardless of how many people share that view. Will there be a requirement for responses to recommendations to be public? And how will transparency be assured? So the ask today is, can the Health and Wellbeing Board work to ensure the principle and function of independent feedback remains on the agenda and agree practical next steps? And since seek clarification for how our functions will be transferred to not only the ICB but also the Council, and expected implications for resources, and how you will mitigate against the potential impact on people's willingness to report experiences and complain directly to providers and commissioners.
Thank you for that, Lynn. So really important conversation. Really appreciate you including the slides in the pack so that everybody's got access to all of those, but then you highlighting that. I think just before I open this up for conversation, just a couple of comments from me. Firstly, I just recognise the framing that you've got around this, which is how do we just make sure we've got that transparency and that independent voice piece going forwards. I think that's a really important part. Let me acknowledge the uncertainty and the ambiguity that you and the team are dealing with, and recognise that not of our making collectively, but in terms of our support for each other, coming from an ICB chief exec perspective, given we're currently going through the changes that we're going through, can absolutely recognise that, and we just want to acknowledge that from sitting here chairing this meeting this morning. I'm sure colleagues and partners would support me in that. And then I think the point that you raise at the end in terms of actually what does this mean and how do we make sure that we protect some of the really good work that you've done in the right way for local residents is a key part of the conversation that that we need to have around that independent voice, around that transparency. The final point from me before I open this up is just to say that as I sit here now, I can confirm I've had nothing in terms of any clarification from the national team in terms of transfer of responsibilities into the Integrated Care Board, and there's been no notification of anything from that. And I'm sure Tanya and Rachel will come in terms of anything from the council's perspective. But having that dialogue and that continued dialogue going forward is going to be really important. And just to recognise the work and the added value. Since I landed in the system some 3 years ago, you've worked with us in a really positive and proactive and sensible way, even when raising some really difficult and challenging issues. So I want to thank you and the team for the approach that you've taken with that, and look forward to continuing to work with you whilst we manage the next stage of the transition. Let me open this up for comments and questions. Tanya.
Thank you, Simon. To build on that, to put on record Shropshire's Council's thanks to Shropshire Health Watch for your challenge and support to ensure that our local Shropshire residents' voices are heard independently from both the council and the NHS. And personal thanks to you, Lynn, for your tenacity and constant challenge, really, to make sure that we truly hear the voices of our Shropshire residents. I think it's fair to say the abolition of Health Watch feels like a real step back in terms of getting the real independent voice of our Shropshire residents. And I guess as a Health and Wellbeing Board, and certainly from a Shropshire Council perspective, we've got to remain resolute and 100% committed to always making sure that we get the independent voice of our residents and not through the lens of any provider. As Simon said, the council has not had any communication around any transitional arrangements, but I want to put on record that we must remain committed to ensure that we always get the independent voice of our residents, and not through any lens of any provider.
Thank you for that, Tanya. Councillor Court.
Thank you, Chair. I'd echo Tanya's comments, and particularly want to refer to slide 7 and the key questions to consider, because they are really pertinent and really important. And I just wonder whether, as a board, we can raise those questions through our channels, through to on our side, through to our political MPs, and then perhaps through the NHS as well, because the loss of that independence, I think, is really important, really critical to the health of the county. But it's just, if it just disappears, we will be in a far worse place. And I think this board has a role to play in raising and highlighting that impact, and the questions are there for a quick cut and paste, I think, into the appropriate correspondence. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bentinck.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to echo the previous comments that Health Watch Shropshire has been a vital part of the service to the residents and patients of Shropshire. And I will do everything I can to encourage the authorities and through the Cabinet to lobby the government and local politicians, and including MPs, to try to ensure that we have a well-funded and independent organisation that will represent the well-being of the people of Shropshire.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Rachel.
Thank you. So just obviously to support everything that's been said, particularly in terms of your role, Lynn, and the role of Health Watch, and the support that you give to the system in the way that you do that, in that kind of independent but transparent way, which is always encouraging and supportive, I think, but making sure that we do not forget and get to the understand patient voice and make sure that that's recognised. There's a huge value in what you've presented, and I think this is a huge gap. So I think, from my point of view, just to, I think, support Councillor Horton was saying, I would agree as a board if we could agree to write to and seek clarification, particularly on some of those areas in terms of those next steps and those mitigation of risks. So add our weight to support that and ask for that clarity back from those meetings. I do wonder if we can, in our workshop that we've got in a few weeks, perhaps pick up how we respond to this as a system. So my concern would be that we end up with more fragmented approach that's confusing for our patients and the public, but we need to absolutely be clear that that independence is fundamental. How do we get that voice as a system, and how do we do it collectively so that we don't end up with lots of approaches and it's not clear, and we need to maintain that independence. I think my final point on that, I think there's a role, personally, my Director of Public Health hat on, the Director of Public Health and the team have a role around being independent and being able to be independent, and you working alongside yourself and the research that you've done and that bring forward that thought is the two have worked very closely together, and you've supported us. We're going to feel that loss even further. So I think there's a conversation around that public health role and what we need to do there and strengthen that, notwithstanding that we're one of the poorest funded in the country as well. So, but I think there's a role specifically around that. So there's probably 3 areas for me, but do not want to lose this. It's so valuable, and thank you for bringing that.
Nigel.
Crikey. Didn't want to shout at you, Lynn. I'm so sorry. And again, I won't repeat things people have said. I think that perhaps there was 2 things that sprung to mind. The first one is just that opportunity for that discussion at the workshop. We've had an annual version of that, haven't we, to look at the priorities and everything else as an integrated system, and I think that's a really important opportunity. As colleagues were thinking, I think we've each got engagement functions, and I wonder whether this is the space that we need to collectively, and especially perhaps get some of the expertise and advice from those colleagues and obviously, Lynn herself, but other engagement functions that we've got across our system, because that feels like an opportunity of where it might sit going forward. I think the other bit that was strike me, and Lynn, you've often reinforced the point that you haven't got much resource, but the reach that you provide and across is really quite significant. And I wonder whether we just need to make sure, picking your brains as we go forward, to just remind ourselves of who then you link in with. Because that's easy to miss, because you will know it and your colleagues. But I'm just thinking, for example, I was talking about this update yesterday with our chief nurse at SATH. And I know you meet with Paula regularly, but that would just be one of the links and the partners that you make. So I think we probably need to make sure that we map all of the stuff that you and your function does provide to see what we don't miss.
Thank you for that, Nigel. Any other comments or contributions? Lynn, before I summarise and bring this item to a conclusion, do you want to come back to any of those points?
Thank you everyone for your comments and your support with this, and also personally thank you for the very kind things you've said about me. It made me want to cry. I just wanted to share with you that just a little example that I've had in recent weeks. So I was part of an interim view visit to one of our providers, and I spoke to a patient who was bedbound, who had been in that bed for 10 months. And that person spoke to me, and yet they had not spoken to anyone else since they'd been there about their experience, because I was from Healthwatch Shropshire, and that instigated quite a lot of activity on my behalf. And people say, how come this person spoke to you and no one else? And I know why. And because it's me who does some of this, I do take this very personally. I'm really passionate about it, and I just want those people to be heard. Thank you.
So, Lynn, thank you for that, and thank you, colleagues, for the contributions. I think there are a number of bits that came out that build on the recommendation that was in the paper, so I'm going to try and pull that together and summarise that. So we were consider the implications of the decision to abolish Healthwatch and that independent voice and people across Shropshire Council. We were asked to consider the impact of that in terms of at the time trying to build public trust in public services and confidence in services to ensure that openness and transparency. And I think we've had that conversation. I think there are a number of things proposed. The first one was, I think, Rachel's proposal in terms of that we should take this into the workshop and have a part of the workshop conversation around independent voice. What does that look like? How do we build our work plan going forwards with the knowledge that we've got about the transition, about the reform agenda that's taking place? I think we would support that. I can't see anybody saying contrary to that. Councillor Horton, supported by Councillor Bentic and other colleagues, suggested and proposed that on behalf of the Health and Wellbeing Board, there's a letter that goes to the relevant places. And I think the importance of that is the framing of that around that independent voice piece, around what does that look like, and securing the resource to enable that to continue to function effectively, recognising there is a reform agenda. So I don't think we're saying we disagree. Choose my words carefully. We're not saying please go and do something different with the reform. We're saying let's make sure the reform still delivers an independent voice in that space in the right way. And I think that was echoed from Council and NHS colleagues. And then I think making sure that we're working through and understanding through the transition that we don't lose sight of that independence in the work that we do as commissioners and as providers, recognising that there are residents, patients, colleagues that will feel more comfortable speaking because of that independence. Your final example brought that to life, Lynn, compared to the statutory bodies. So how do we consider that in the work that we do taking forward? So I'm asking for Health and Wellbeing Board colleague support in building on the recommendations that were in the paper to make sure that I reflect and the committee reflects the nature of the conversation that took place. Colleagues, happy to approve that and support that on the basis we take it forward. Thank you for that, and thank you, Lynn. I'm going to move us on, and for those following in the pack, we're then going back up the agenda into the Children's Service Reform and Families First agenda. Natalie, you're very welcome. I'm going to work on the principle of papers. Natasha, sorry, I've only worked with you for several years in Staffs and Stoke, and literally live several hundred yards apart. But apart from that, yeah. So take the paper as read, but then bring it to life and get into the conversation. So Natasha.
Okay, thank you everybody for your time this morning. So we've brought this paper to you today because of the nature really of the level of transformation that's being asked really from central government. And actually if this was just about the local authority necessarily be having this conversation, but actually the framing of this is much more about the partnership and its role in helping the local authority to fulfil its functions. To put that in context, we have got statutory legislation which is going through Parliament now. A number of kind of amendments are being made to that as it goes through the processes, but actually a number of policy statements are also being released at the same time to help us understand what this might look like. And it's really clear to me that actually it's going to have a fundamental impact on the way we work as a partnership together to support children, young people and their families. So that's the context. I've included in the slide pack, which I'm not sure if anyone had the chance to look, a video. I won't play it today. It is 30 minutes long, so it is a bit longer, but I think it's really helpful for you potentially to use with your teams to help them understand where the reforms have come from and the level of significance that they will have across our system. We've already started conversations with a number of people in different partnership arenas to try and make sure that we're progressing these changes. And actually that's a really helpful, I think, conversation starter in terms of why these changes have come about. But essentially they're aimed at rebalancing our system towards early intervention and prevention, which I think is a critical role that this board plays. And I won't go into the detail of the slides, I will take them as read, but I do want to just say a couple of things because actually what the government are asking us to do can feel like a bit of a mire really of things, and actually it's sometimes hard to understand how those things come together. So I just want to say that essentially what the government are asking us to deliver as a multi-agency partnership is about 120 different things by the 1st of April 2026. And of those 120 things, about 85 of them relate to the partnership and not the local authority. So there's a very small amount of things that we've got to do as a local authority. The rest of it is about how we function effectively together to meet the needs of those children and people. And essentially what they're saying is we want you to get back into communities that need your help and support. We want you to take away some of what has become quite process-driven procedures, really. And we want you to operate as an effective multi-agency team. And originally when I started in this post, I thought that might be quite difficult to convince people that there was a reason for us kind of sitting together. But actually when we've facilitated some of the multi-agency sessions, people are desperate to be back together. They're missing the physical connection of being in a room together to be able to have some of those conversations, and have become frustrated really with the level of referral culture we've got in the system, which means you can't actually get the help and support. And even when we're talking to people about the system and the change we need to evoke, actually they can't imagine a world where you don't do a referral, and actually we've got to help them to unlearn really some of this behaviour that's become the new normal, because actually it's not necessarily effective in helping children get the help and support they need and keep their needs at a level at which they could be at. And it's not necessarily just a local authority that are experiencing this challenge, it's health partners as well, who've seen just a massive kind of escalation of need into the most acute end of our systems, which actually is unsustainable. So they're asking us to get into communities, be part of a multidisciplinary team, be based together. They're asking us to offer families help, and they're saying that that should come from the people who know them most. And I think that's really important, because at the moment most of that support is delivered by the local authority. And what I've kind of said to the partnership is, when you're a school, for example, and it's not just schools, but that's an example to use, and you say to this family, I've run out of options, I need to go and get somebody else to come and help you, how do you think that makes the family feel? You know, there is something real about actually you being the person who says, I'm going to bring some people in to help me, actually, and take that onus away from it being passed on to somebody else to kind of help fix those problems. So they're asking us to make sure that the right people are leading those family help conversations, but working with that multi-agency partnership. And they're asking us to do that in a way that we are utilising the community networks of support that people have. So again, really practical example I would give you is when I was growing up, I had an auntie who wasn't my auntie. And the reason she was called an auntie is because she was so familiar to me and my family, because she helped and supported us on a number of different occasions when my mum couldn't do things because she was working. And my mum did the same for her. So actually, we need to go back to thinking about those networks of support that families and communities have got that aren't about the state intervening in that space. Because actually, quite frankly, it's not always necessary. And actually, we're not there when we kind of leave, but the community and that resilience still is. So they're asking us to do that. And then the brand new thing that they're asking us to do is formulate something called a multi-agency child protection team. So this is brand new. Even the Pathfinder local authorities are still kind of grappling with what this might look like. We've had the release of a policy statement last week which talks about the fact that there has to be a health, local authority, police and education representative that make up that multi-agency child protection team. That will be a must do. But there are a range of other partners who might be part of that, including domestic abuse services, probation, youth offending, who actually might be there to help and support the needs of individual families who might have that level of need. So that's going to be a really different way of working for us, where actually we come and provide a level of check and challenge, really. I'll describe it as, where we're looking and saying, have we exhausted all of the possible options we've got for this family before we bring them into care? Because actually, care is never a good option for a child. The outcomes for those children are much, much poorer throughout their life course, and that's just not what we want for our children. And at the minute in Shropshire, we've got way too many children in care, second highest in the region. You wouldn't necessarily say that somewhere like Shropshire should be like that. So we really do need to think differently about how we work in this space. So essentially, we're asking for your help, really, to get your head around the agenda, understand it well, make sure it's got the priority and visibility within your respective organisation, so that fundamentally we can help the partnership to make sure that not only is it implemented, but it's implemented in a way that actually really helps our families to be able to successfully live independently without some of our help and support. What I would also say as well is that this is really important, kind of linking into that conversation about Health Watch, because what it's really saying about the engagement of kind of children, young people and families is we need to put them front and centre of the decisions that are made about them. We need to stop doing what we think is best and think about actually them and their needs. And actually sometimes that isn't necessarily the interventions that we're putting in place. It certainly, I'm sure, isn't a referral and waiting for a service and support for a number of weeks or months or even years in some cases. So actually we need to think differently about how we engage their views through some of the kind of ways of working. So we're trying to do a lot of work at the moment to make sure that their views are front and centre of this, really. And I think that probably covers it off. The other things in the pack are there for information. We've done a summary of some of the key themes from the findings of the consultation that we've been doing with people. We've done a summary of some of the other kind of changes that we're trying to use to complement this programme of work. So it's not just about Families First Partnership. We talked to you last time about the local youth transformation. That really should be one of the kind of foundational aspects of this change programme, along with family hubs, so that actually we're building on the successes that we've got in that preventative space, so that we're less reliant on some of those later services. So hopefully that was some helpful summary, but happy to take any questions people might have.
Thanks. Thank you for that, Natasha. So, I mean, look, from my perspective, there are so many things changing, feels like, at the same time. Actually, these slides and you presenting the slides was really helpful, just to bring in and consolidate it in one place. What does this mean and what does it look like? So that's helpful for that in the first instance. So we're grateful for that. Let's open that up for conversation and discussion. I'm just going to lead off on that in terms of when you then looked at, when we completed the self-assessment and we pulled that together in the key themes, I am assuming then we're working collaboratively on an action plan or a development plan that then takes that self-assessment and is prioritised and says, what does that look like going forwards?
Yeah, so that's a really helpful reminder, actually, Simon, that in the agenda, I think you should have a link to the scrutiny papers that have come before the Local Authority Scrutiny Committee. And in there, we include a copy of the action plan. It's currently in draft. We're still reiterating it as some of the task and finishes groups start to get to grips with what they need to do. I would imagine that that will start to take much better shape as we start to enter into April, given that we've got to deliver these reforms by March 2026. So yes, it is based on the self-assessment that we did. And it does try to prioritise the activity where we've got the furthest distance to travel.
Thank you for that. Claire.
Thank you. I feel like I've been flung back to the days of multi-agency safeguarding hubs. Just to say, we work really closely with the children and family hubs across Shropshire, and I think there's probably even more that we can do. So we have to create the MDT for children and young people, the multidisciplinary team meetings. And I think actually music to my ears about not diagnosing and labelling children and families before they get the help and support that they need. And I think that kind of the neighbourhood, community, family hub approach really works in our favour around that. So it'd be really good to take a wider conversation outside of this meeting to see how much more we can link and make those connections and direct you to the right people, particularly in the health service, to make sure that we're supporting and delivering that for our children and families. I'm really keen that we link in around some of the education work as well. I've got a daughter who's a primary school teacher now, so I get all of this front and centre, but that kind of parenting support as well, making children school ready, and how we deliver that through communities as well, particularly those with additional needs.
Thank you for that, Claire. David, and then I'll bring in other colleagues.
Thank you, Chair. Colleagues, I just want to echo the importance of these reforms, and actually really thank Natasha for bringing this together. We see this as almost a once in a generation opportunity really to reset some of the interdependencies that may or may not have quite worked previously, and take forward in a much more coherent way what we all want to see for children and young people and their families, actually, because we can't forget the children generally come with some type of adult representation with their families or extended families all the way through. I think there's a real opportunity to align this all to the Health and Wellbeing Board priorities, both the current and whatever we determine to be the future ones. I think I'd really echo the board's eyes and scrutiny and challenge, I think, on the adult space as well, because whilst this sounds like it's all about children, we can't forget those families, and I'll make that point again. And we know from the analysis we've done, lots of the reasons why we see the children and people in our care in Shropshire are because of reasons that are related to the family environment and the family members themselves. So without we change those behaviours, circumstances, situations for the family, we are not going to impact sufficiently on the children and young people themselves. So we're really clear in Shropshire that whilst we have high numbers, we're absolutely comfortable and confident that the threshold of coming into care is absolutely appropriate. Ofsted tell us that, the court tell us that, we don't have challenges in that space. Our opportunity, colleagues, is to see what we can do to change the environment and the factors that are affecting those young people, stopping them returning back to their family, either their birth family or their extended family. That's even before we consider foster care or anything else that's said beyond that. So I just want to re-emphasise that for board members, really. I don't think we can lose sight of that. So I would really encourage our focus to be in that space. I know we've got a housing paper that's coming through, really good example. We're going to talk about mental health. We've got the CAMS contract being recommissioned, starting again in April. Come back to what I said, we're at an opportunity now for a once in a generation reset of where we're going to go. And I know there are challenges around resources, but I think again alignment can often resolve maybe not all, but a lot of those challenges. So I just encourage members to have that awareness, please. Thank you.
Really helpful, David. Thank you for that. So then Rachel and then Councillor Bent.
Yeah, and I was going to, David, some of what you'd said. For me, I think, and I know I've said this previously, I think as a board, Claire alluded to, we've done quite a lot of work in terms of the test and learn, and in this space in terms of prioritising children and young people that we think in the previous strategy we hadn't thought was a priority. So we brought that forward in this strategy and done a lot of work. The community focus that you've talked about, absolutely, the integration. So I think this is a really good opportunity to build on that, to look at the remainder of the strategy and what we want to deliver and what sits in a partnership space, because I would argue this is probably one of our, in terms of place, this is our partnership committee. We've got obviously a scrutiny committee, but this is where the partnership role absolutely firmly sits. And then I think, as you said, David, influencing the strategy going forward, we're at that point in time. So there's immediate asks, but those longer term, how do we influence that into our strategy? So it was really to echo what you're saying. I know I've said not to lose sight of what we've done, because some of the comments that you made, we heard that loud and clear actually out of COVID when we set up the test and learns that led to the family and children's hubs around people just not coming back together. Some of that shifted. I think I fear that we've lost some of, we put quite a lot of work into that, and I think some of that and those connections and that multi-agency working, we've maybe lost some of the focus. This gives us a really chance to focus. Prevention is what we've pushed really hard through this board. So I guess my suggestion is, do we think about with the action plans and this, how this sits, what sits in this partnership and that reporting here, as you were kind of alluding to, David, what we can link into the current strategy, the final stages of it, and then where do we want that to go going forward? But that ownership, I feel, is colleagues here.
Really helpful. Thank you for that, Rachel. Councillor Bentic.
Thank you, Chair. What I was going to say has been mostly said by others, and just want to reinforce the importance of looking at the whole family and the community, and that there needs to be as much integration as possible of the various partnerships, and I'm sure they'll be included. We haven't spoken about primary care, but they're a vital link, and other community organisations, to see how we can optimise what resources there are for the benefit of these families, and moving forward to determine if there's additional grants or other funding that we can access in order to make sure that the resources follow the wishes that we have.
Thank you for that, Tanya.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm pleased all my comments have kind of been made previously. We're 14 months away from enacting this really important duty for this partnership. I think it's really important, Natasha, that we have a risk log, because I do think as a partnership there are some risks in implementing this new statutory duty. If we just give the figure, so this partnership was given a figure of 666,000 to implement this new duty. That's one of the lowest figures in the country. I think this places a significant risk as a partnership in delivering what we're now mandated to deliver in a very rural county like Shropshire.
Thank you for that, Tanya. Might be that we pick up outside of here, but is there, I'm assuming there was some reasoning given in terms of the funding or the level of funding, and whether there is any value at all in going back on any of that. Not suggesting that we necessarily want to debate here, but it's whether there is any value in that. I don't want to.
I can confirm that we have made a lot of noise and representation to government departments regarding very poor allocation on this particular grant, and I can also confirm the local authority has made a representation around the settlement, that again we had a very poor settlement this time round, not recognising the rurality of delivering services in a county like Shropshire.
In terms of the children's settlement bit that you talked about and the funding for this, I would imagine that's something from a Health and Wellbeing Board partner perspective, that's something that we'd want to absolutely stand side by side at the council with. So there's perhaps something else to go in terms of that. Certainly from a health perspective, I would support that.
Absolutely, and the reason why I mentioned a risk log, because I think there are some real live risks in implementing this duty. And I think as a Health and Wellbeing Board, and certainly Simon as the lead safeguarding partners, we need to make sure that all of us are sighted on that.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor.
Yes, thank you. And I reiterate Tanya's comments, particularly around the funding, which was a disappointment when we received it. We can't do anything about it. There's part of our improvement board colleagues that they were quite surprised that it was so low. Well, shocked, I think, is probably a better explanation. But given the potential risks around the partnership and the different stages that the partners are at, each partner is at in implementing this, I think it would be really helpful to have this coming back perhaps in 6 months to the board to see progress. 14 months is going to fly by, isn't it? It always does, you know. So if we could have that as a forward agenda item, I think it would be really helpful. Thank you.
I would fully support that, Councillor. Look, you know, we touched on the Health and Wellbeing Board many times, the principles of the Marmot principles and how they underpin the approach in terms of tackling health inequalities to enable children, adults to live the best lives possible in the areas that we've got responsibility for. And the very first one of the Marmot principles is give every child the best start in life. And so our focus on bringing a particular lens to that as a collective, I think should never be far from every piece of work that we do. So I think we bring that focus, definitely bring it, Natasha, if it's okay with you to come back in 6 months, but let's not wait for the 6 months if you feel as though actually there's something that needs to be sooner. That's the other bit I'd say, recognising then we'll pick it up through other conversations as well. Natasha, any final comments from you before I bring this bit to a close?
No, just to thank everybody for the support, really. I think you're right, there are some real life risks, but actually it is a great opportunity really for us to think about how we work differently together. So yeah, appreciate that.
Okay, thank you for that. We were asked to note the report, but I do think there was actions in terms of that came through that conversation that we'll then pick up and make sure we represent as well. So thank you for that, and thank you, Natasha and colleagues. I'm going to move us on agenda-wise, if that's okay. So agenda item 7, Housing and Health Action Plan. Laura.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to come back and update on this. I will assume that everybody has read the papers, so I'll just kind of pull out some of the key points from them. So collectively, the papers set out the strategic approach that we've got to improving health outcomes through housing. They demonstrate how housing delivery, regulation, adaptations and partnership working are being aligned with health, care and wellbeing priorities. However, we do acknowledge that we haven't moved at the pace that we hoped that we would. The report and the action plan do demonstrate what's been delivered so far, but I think we need to recognise the increased regulation in the sector over the last kind of 12 to 18 months. And hopefully the report and action plan does show where our focus will be over the next 12 months going forward. So key points to highlight. The work remains grounded in the LGA high impact change model, which was something that we all discussed and went through when we had the workshops. However, what we've decided to do with this update is review and simplify the action plan. We wanted to bring together some of the related actions so that they were more streamlined and kind of easier to look through and understand what those actions are. The aim of the action plan now is to be far more measurable, realistic and aligned with regulatory, planning and commissioning priorities. So progress has continued despite significant operational pressures and, like I say, the increased regulation in the sector. So a couple of things that I just wanted to pull out from the report and the action plan, some of the positives. So over the past 12 months, the council has significantly improved its offer of temporary accommodation. We've opened 4 schemes across Shropshire for single households, which equates to over 100 bed spaces. So this has significantly reduced our use of bed and breakfast, and I think everybody can recognise the benefits that will bring in regard to health and wellbeing for the residents. We've also commissioned a report from the Housing Lin, and I've mentioned a couple of times that I think the board would really benefit from a separate report coming on that to go into a little bit more detail. But in brief, the report provides an evidence-based assessment for the current and future needs for specialist and supported housing across Shropshire, so something that is very much linked to the housing and health work that we've been doing. We've also had a stronger focus on regulatory compliance. So there's the work around the regulator of social housing. So this is where effectively on a similar footing to Ofsted or CQC, the regulator of social housing comes in and inspects housing providers, of which the council is one. We've also got Arab's Law and also the Renters' Rights Act. So compliance with housing regulations significantly improves health outcomes. So it isn't just about doing the right thing because that's what the regulation says. It absolutely ensures that homes are safe, warm and fit for habitation, which equally reduces the physical and mental health risks associated with poor housing conditions, a key part of the housing and health work that we started with. Strong compliance also promotes preventative intervention, effective asset management and tenant engagement. Finally, I just wanted to pick up on the case study. Those of you that know me know that I'm always about people, so I wanted to bring something in that was real life. So the aim of the case study is just to provide a real practical example of how housing investment can directly support healthcare and independence. The case study demonstrates really good value for money and also what we can achieve when we work in partnership. So the case study illustrates the practical reality behind the action plan, showing how the right housing intervention at the right time delivers better outcomes for the individual and better value for the system as a whole. So in conclusion, we absolutely recognise that there is still significant work to do, but hopefully the documents show that there is strong progress in embedding housing as a core part of our health and wellbeing system. And the revised action plan gives us a solid deliverable framework for the next phase. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, Laura. And just following on the theme from the children's agenda conversation piece and the Marmot principle piece, we know, don't we, that good housing, warm, safe housing has a bigger impact on health outcomes than anything that happens when you actually get into NHS care. So the importance of this agenda alongside prevention agenda, the children agenda, absolutely cannot be understated in this space. So thank you for bringing that. And I heard and noted, and we will have, I think we'll agree, bringing a future update in terms of housing, Lynn, that you talked about, I think is important as well. Open this up for comments. Councillor.
Yes, very quickly, just really pleased to see that, and particularly around the additional temporary accommodation for 100 units of accommodation. That's really positive, and those improved outcomes and health outcomes. Is there a dashboard of KPIs around those units of accommodation? For example, how many people accommodated are able to register with a GP or a dentist and keep keep track on the impact of that housing?
So there's not, but that's a great suggestion actually, and something that I'll take back to the team. So I can either feed that back at a future item or as part of that housing Lynn when we come back. Brilliant.
Thank you, Councillor. Nigel.
And again, I really support this, and for all those of us who've been involved in the development of the neighbourhood work and built from communities, this is again just so vital, isn't it? What I was just thinking of, and and again, perhaps back to Rachel's point around the workshop that we've got not quite shortly about the sort of building the next phase of work. I think the thing which strikes me when you look at, and perhaps parochially from a health perspective, is actually some of the, lots of the demand is not necessarily driven by all of the population. It's still focused on core groups. And it might be worth thinking about how we work, just be a bit more explicit on the cohorts of our residents, from patient groups, from the health, and just make sure that we've got perhaps more explicit cross-referencing of those, because I do wonder whether again we're all going to be pressed to make the best use of what we do, but particularly those ones that are more vulnerable, have got the challenges, how we can continue to rally together. But again, this is a multi-agency thing, isn't it? But thank you.
So taking the housing agenda work into the neighbourhoods bit, I know it's there already, but then just being really clear, what does that mean as we're doing the tackling health inequalities piece and understanding our population so that we target in the right areas?
It is, because sorry, once again, it's almost certain we're going to be talking about the same residents, and it's just continuing to bring that. It's not an integrated discussion; it becomes the same discussion. Then how we support residents, how we wrap around all the services.
Third.
Thank you. No, just building on that, I think it's a really good report, and again, just taking that to the next stage. So if you take young people with SEND currently and the expected reform that's going to take place that we heard a little bit about before, the expectation is that actually that group of young people are going to be in more mainstream type environments. So actually, what does that mean for the future direction travel in terms of housing needs, adaptations, or limited adaptations, technology? So I suppose it's actually moving that forward in that direction, because I think what we're going to see is that expectation that those young people are educated in a much more inclusive mainstream way. So that should be our expectation to health and wellbeing board for their lives actually moving forward.
Thank you for that, David. David, and then Councillor Benton.
Thank you. Just picking up on the action in the action plan, Laura, around developing housing for essential works, including the care sector. It'd be interested to see if you've got any evidence of the impact that you're having through that, because we know adult social care is the biggest employer in Shropshire. I sit on the Marches LSIT board. There was a meeting on Tuesday. The number of workers in the care sector is predicted to grow even bigger as the Asian population and complexity. So obviously it's going to be a really big issue in terms of care staff being able to live locally and afford to live locally, not having to drive in from Wolverhampton or the Black Country. Thank you.
Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Clearly, this is one strand of a really important wraparound service, as much as it can be for our population. And I just point out that we're currently producing a health and all policies production that will include housing and other important aspects, including transport and the various strands that make up the Marmot principles. At this point, I wonder whether there's an opportunity to actually become a Marmot place, as a number of authorities and ICBs jointly are around the country. So perhaps there's an action to inquire whether we can do that.
It's in our gift to adopt the principles and say what we're doing about it. And I think take that into the workshop. I've certainly raised that previously, Councillor. I'd be supportive of that. Okay, really helpful conversation. Laura, on listening to that, I know you've interacted in the conversations. Anything else, any final points you'd want to say in terms of that? But future commitments in terms of bringing the improvement network update back and thinking about this in terms of the wider Marmot principles piece, in terms of what does that mean for us as a place. So thank you for that, Laura, and the dashboard conversation that Councillor Orton raised as well. Okay, thank you. I'm going to move us on if that's okay. So in the slightly moved around agenda piece, I'm now coming to the special education needs, disabilities and alternative provision update. So David and John.
Thank you, Chair. We're just going to invite another colleague to join us as well. So we'll do some introductions in a moment as we work our way through this. But as we've taken with all the reports, we've shared a range of information in advance. We're not going to step through the report. We expect that to be read and noted. I think it's a tale of opportunity and challenge in equal measure in this space. So we can see lots of positive directions of moving forward. That's been noted by lots of different people. But we absolutely see and recognise some really difficult, wicked issues that are absolutely system-wide. So I think I'll hand to John and then Sarah just to step through a little bit of the information that we've got in here that will relate directly to the work as it stands in the pack. We shared the overall strategy that was reviewed, updated, again through a wide range of co-production and approved by Cabinet quite recently. So actually we're on that direction travel moving forward. And as we heard in one of the previous items, we're about to see a further update of reforms, whatever that may well look like. So John, I'll hand over to you, please.
Right there. Good morning, everyone. I'm John Rowe, Head of Education Quality and Safeguarding in Learning and Skills. And as David explained, we are in the process of grappling with some quite difficult issues nationally with respect to the system, with respect to SEND. We know there's been numerous reports from the National Audit Office and others reflecting the absolute crisis in SEND, the challenges in relation to funding, the issues around long waiting lists, to support those children with the most complex needs. And those issues are acutely felt in a county such as ours, with issues of demography and challenges around historic low funding issues. So we've been in the process of working collaboratively with our partners across the SEND and AP partnership, including parent carers, to really design and shape a new system. A system which works for all of Shropshire's children, but also has an eye on the national direction of travel, which we hope to have more clarity on in the publication of the government's white paper. As David mentioned, we do face considerable challenges, and one of the papers in the appendices is the report from Ofsted, which following our most recent annual conversation, which reflects some of the challenges which we, like a lot of other local authorities, face with respect to aspects of timeliness in terms of assessments, timeliness with respect to EHCPs, but absolutely recognises where we have made progress. We have got absolute commitment and a determination to improve waiting times, both for those waiting for assessments and both with respect to diagnostic pathways as well as those undergoing the ECNA process as well. We've invested in driving down those waiting lists and also putting resource to ensure that where children are waiting, that they continue to receive high quality support and intervention. A central plank of our reforms, our improvements has been the commitment to high quality inclusive practice. We made a commitment to this several years ago, and we've been very much ahead of the curve because this will be the direction of travel which the white paper will seek to be able to make standard across the country. We've looked to be able to resolve and to build high quality specialist support for children as close to home as possible. We recognise the challenges caused by tremendous distances that some children are forced to travel to be able to access special schools, and we recognise that children's needs are very often better met in local provision, but that local provision will only be effective if there's high quality support that goes along that. We're in the process of working towards the changes that we expect to be announced within the white paper, and a key element of this will be the development of a local inclusion support offer, where we're in a position to explain with clarity and provide a resource to schools and settings in order to meet children's needs well, because we recognise that schools and settings are facing more complex needs, and sheer force of will isn't going to enable them to meet it. They need to be highly trained and they need to be resourced. So I'll hand over to my colleague Sarah Court, who's our Senior Education Improvement Advisor for SEND and AP, to be able to explain how the piece of work that we're involved with respect to that. Thanks, Sarah.
Hi, so yeah, as John said, I'm Sarah Court. I'm the Senior Education Quality Advisor for SEND and AP. I'm also currently the Programme Manager for the SEND and AP Change Programme, which we've been involved as part of the West Midlands Partnership. So we're very much coming towards the end of the SEND and AP Change Programme at the moment. It officially finishes at the end of August, but it's very much rolled into now just waiting for the white paper, for which we've had 3 dates, but we're really hoping we might have it by half term. And once that arrives, it will be looking at what everything that we've been doing in the change programme, particularly over the last 12 months, is really running into being able to deliver that white paper. So in some respects, we're ahead of the curve because everything that we've been doing through the change programme has given us a real heads up about what's going to be in that white paper. Which means we've got a really good opportunity now to start planning to be able to implement those reforms. We have looked at a reform readiness tool as part of the SEND and AP Partnership Board, which has helped us to kind of assess where we're at. But as John's explained, there is going to be the expectation that we are able to put in place a local inclusion support offer, which has 3 functions. One is training, the other is advice and guidance, and the other is direct delivery of support. So at the moment we are working with our Parent Care Forum, with PAC, to co-produce with parent carers what that might look like, and also with our schools and settings. It's everything that we offer across the SEND system to be able to support mostly our mainstream settings to be able to meet the needs of pupils with SEND. And we know that that is increasingly complex. So what we're thinking about at the moment is, what does our CPD offer need to look like? What does our funding offer need to be look like? And what does that direct delivery of support need to look like? I think what we have found from the change programme over the last year, 2 years, is that hands-on support. So through the LSEC project, through the PINS project, through our neurodiversity practitioners, and at the moment we're running specialist outreach using staff from some of our special schools and also our SEMH specialists through our Outshine team. Actually getting into schools and doing the hands-on support is the thing that's making the biggest difference. Our schools are awash with advice. They don't need advice. What they need is somebody to come in and help them to implement it, and to almost be the stabilisers essentially, and to not take those stabilisers off and to step back until the schools are confidently doing it themselves. That comes with challenges because we are a very large county geographically, and every meeting I have with the DFE, I have to keep raising that and saying that's much more difficult to deliver in Shropshire. So previously I worked in Telford, where I could get to every school within 10 minutes, and I used to run the Senko networks in Telford, where I only had to run one because all schools could come. Here, in order to be able to face-to-face meet with our Senkos, which is really, really important, we have to run 3. So everything's done in least triplicate, and it's really, don't get me started about funding for rural counties, because I'm sure we'll never get off that. But so it does come with its challenges, but we've got to try and find ways around that. But as I've said, that's what we're currently doing at the moment, is trying to plan. In an ideal world, what would that delivery look like? And I think we are going to have to aim high so that we can meet the needs of our children. It's not just about saving money. So we talk a lot about children being able to go to their local schools, and that does save money in terms of transport, which is great for us. But also it means that children get to go to school in their local community, which is really, really important and massively ties into everything Natasha was talking about before in terms of the family hubs and the Family First Partnership. So I don't think there is a lack of will. We know what needs to be done, and we're really, really committed to being able to deliver it. And as I said, we've got a fairly good idea of what's coming from the white paper. So it's just starting to put that into process now.
Thank you, Chair. No, just to say, so I think, colleagues, just returning back to the report, what we try to do here is just provide a high-level overview in terms of the wide range of activity. I think it's important to note that this is held and gripped by the Send an AP Partnership Board. So, again, Health Wellbeing Board members are welcome if they ever want to attend a partnership board. That's always an open invitation. We always extend that to the DFE and NHS England also, again for complete transparency. So that follow-up and action planning is there. Similarly, we've included in the report, should colleagues wish to review the self-evaluation, again, if they could just communicate that with John Rowe, we'll make sure that that is shared with people, and likewise the action plan that underpins all this work. So again, it's all around trying to bring this together. I think my final point will just return us back to the reforms. All of this is trying to broadly do similar things. If you come back to the points from the Health and Wellbeing Board strategy, you can see real alignment here, can't you? So I think we've got a real opportunity to accelerate some areas. But I think, Tanya, your point previously around risks and challenges, I think we do come back to that. Whether we look at the public health grant, we look at the overall grant for education, the council settlement, the ICB funding settlements, all of those key blocks of funding are much, much lower than other areas nationally. Yet we're still tasked with the same inspection frameworks by our regulators, and actually have great ambition for our children, people and our residents. So our challenge is to make those things work, really. As Sarah described quite articulately, we have to do things twice or 3 times where other areas do it once. So I think, colleagues, from us, that's probably where we are as an update, but we're happy to take any questions or comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. Really helpful. And look, I think our approach when we try and pull the Health and Wellbeing Board agendas together is how do we link agenda items and have a coherence. It's not just a list of let's put things on an agenda and hope what happens happens at the end of it and the magic suddenly happens. So having Natasha's agenda item, having Laura's item, having this item absolutely is around bringing a focus in today's meeting around children, people, a healthy start in life, what the contributing factors to that. I also think including in the report the transparency of the letters from Ofsted and CQC is really important in terms of that visibility piece, so we can see the progress that's been made and the recognition of that, whilst also us setting out and talking about here the areas that we're doing. Obviously, my chief nurse in terms of Vanessa is really closely involved in this agenda, and we talk about this on a regular basis, so that partnership piece as well on a number of the agenda items I think has come through really strongly in that, so thank you for that. Nigel.
So just to quickly declare an interest as a trustee of the Learning Community Trust, Multi-Academy Trust, for which Sevendale sits. I suppose it was just really to commend colleagues for, because there's such a lot of active discussion in this space. Obviously, it's really, really important. But I think the way in which John colleagues have drawn the right people into some of these discussions and co-produced that with some of the experts, and particularly the point that Tanya was mentioning around the challenge that we have in Shropshire in terms of rurality, just physical distance, and then when you look at perhaps this small core of experts, the teachers, the support staff, is how best to make use of those to best support our children. But just really commend John and David and colleagues for the way in which you're doing that.
Councillor.
So, thanks, Chair. By the way, I'm Andy Hall. I'm the portfolio holder for Education and Children's up in Salt Lloyds, you know, at the back there, out of the way. I've got to say the colleagues, you've summed it up pretty well and bringing this all together. And I too do commend our staff for the hard work that's gone into this. And a lot of it goes on behind closed doors. You've heard all the challenges that this place faces at the moment. And it's really challenging, particularly with the finance and indeed the uncertainty of the white paper, which seems to be the can kicked down the road, and we'd like to see that sort of come forward for some clarity. But I think you're absolutely right. I think the Shropshire Council are ahead of the game here, and rightly so. And a big, massive thanks for the hard work for making us in that position to go forward. A bit of good news. Obviously, there's the £24 million worth of investment that's going into our schools with the Phase 4, which was announced at Cabinet yesterday. And of course, that will feed into our SEND provision. And as mentioned before, it's helping our young people learn in the environments that they live in, and with their peers in their own environments, and saves all that travelling around the county as well, and focuses our provision. So, yeah, a big, massive thanks to the team, I think. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And given the agenda items, you sitting and being part of the Health and Wellbeing Board as portfolio holder, really important given the number of agenda items on this. So thank you for your time this morning as well in terms of that. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on the rurality and relate to the settlement we've had from Shropshire, it's been well publicised that we're not happy with it. It's very low, but the critical thing is that the Rural Services Delivery Grant has been removed, which really impacts on things like home to school transport. So although there's been an element added back in for adult social care, it doesn't pick up on all that rural delivery costs. So I just want to make partners aware of the impact of that, and we are where we are with it, but it does have an impact, or could have an impact, until we start to get some of these sort of more local hubs in place for school provision.
Thank you for highlighting that, Councillor. John, you want to come back in?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think that the financial position, it really has a bearing on the impact and the level of support, and I think we are in such an inequitable situation compared to other local authorities. Prior to this meeting, I was at Schools Forum, and I just wanted to share with this group a fact that we shared with Schools Forum, which the Shropshire Council was the 15th worst funded local authority with respect to the high needs block dedicated schools grant out of 151 local authorities. And I think this inequity, my colleagues have worked absolutely tirelessly across the partnership to try and resolve this. But where we're faced with such massive inequity, it has a bearing. And it has a bearing on waiting lists. It has a bearing on the level of support we want to provide. And it builds frustration. And it builds frustration and anger within the system, puts teacher against parent against local authority, where actually what we need to do is to be able to think about the level of funding that we're actually getting as a base level.
Thank you for that. David, any final comments?
No, just to say, colleagues, obviously we've asked you to note the report. We're happy to provide any further information, but I think it's been a useful conversation. Any influence, opportunity to change, lobby, support, share, any of those things, we are actively doing that within the council. I know ICB colleagues are also. It's being listened to, heard, probably the phrase I'd use. I've not seen any changes as a result of that, but we are continuing to do that. I think it's important to put that on record on behalf of residents and young people of Shropshire. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and thank you, colleagues, for joining this morning and being part of that conversation and discussion. As David said, we're asked to note the report, but I think there's a great richness that's come through in terms of both the report and also the conversation discussion that took place. So thank you, colleagues, for that. I'm going to move us on then, if that's okay. I'm going to move us on to the Health and Wellbeing Strategy Delivery Progress Agenda item. Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. So this report that's in your pack, and this is our first attempt, following a request of the Health and Wellbeing Board, to bring together a kind of comprehensive update on our progress towards our strategy during the period that the strategy has been in existence. So that was from 2022, and it runs till the end of this year. Next year, sorry, the progress we've reported during that time. So apologies, we should have brought something should have come through sooner. This is us trying to set that baseline. We've given updates within the meeting previously, but this tries to bring it together into one comprehensive place. This is a draft structure for the report. What it does is bring together both the high-level outcomes that we set ourselves in our strategy, remembering this is a long-term vision, and particularly we all know within health and wellbeing you don't see significant change in a short amount of time. So these are our long-term ambitions, but we set out some immediate priority areas. The report attempts to look at both the progress towards those outcome measures that we set ourselves and keep a track of those, and we have a dashboard around those outcomes, but also that immediate delivery that we've put in place around those, some of the metrics and the deliverables that we've been monitoring through health and wellbeing, but also in some of our other governance structures. So it does show within the report, as you'll have seen, that there has been a shift and an improvement in overall metrics, but we have seen a worsening in some of those areas, and it's important for us to note that, particularly, and not surprisingly perhaps, given that this covers the period of during COVID and the cost of living crisis, which this board has had a significant focus around, but we've seen a decrease in healthy life expectancy. The issue of access has come out very strongly, and again we've seen a decrease in our levels of access, and we've talked about that a lot today. Some children and young people, we've again having that theme around that, but we've talked about mental health and care, and we know those, and hence some of the papers today, obesity and diabetes. So what this report to do, we weren't going to have a huge discussion about, I don't believe today. It was really to get your feedback on the style of that reporting. It's very fortuitous. We have our dashboard workshop that is coming up on, I'm going to check the date because it's the 12th of February. In the afternoon. So this is, I would suggest this is an opportunity to bring that report as a kind of introduction to that meeting. What I would say is the report does highlight, when you look at that we've actually done a huge amount of work around joining up, around children, young people, around inequalities and prevention, and the community focus. That was that's our strategic ambitions we set ourselves. And then underneath those, some of those key priority areas, we have had a focus, and through the work of the board, and seen this impact documented. There is some omissions, I would suggest. One of those is workforce, and the work we need to do around that and our workforce. So I would suggest that's probably a focus, and we can take that into the workshop of our final year of our strategy. The other bit that I'd just flag is that actually some of the areas that as priority areas, action has taken place, but it doesn't report directly or systematically, perhaps as it should, to this board. If I talk about particularly the Community Safety Partnership, there's a lot of activity that happens there in terms of drugs and alcohol, domestic abuse agendas, road traffic collisions. And it's actually timely that probably on our next agenda we can pick up the annual report of the Community Safety Partnership. We just need to tighten up and make sure that we're getting regular reports through. So hopefully this is a useful mechanism to bring all that together. It allows us to focus on what progress we are making and not making. I'd suggest it allows us to tighten up on some of our governance. Would welcome feedback on the report, but suggest also we take this into our workshop for the detailed discussion about what we do this year, and then set the context for the strategy going forward.
That's really helpful, Rachel, and I think we've talked about this over several months, haven't we? So, but actually bringing the report and now starting to talk about it, I think is a really positive step forward. So thank you to you and colleagues for the work that we've gone in collating this and pulling this together, because I know that won't have been straightforward either, because not everything sits in one place at the same time and gets reported at the same time. So let's just recognise the work that will have been involved to get this to this point. I think your proposal in terms of saying it's here to raise the awareness of it, but to take into the workforce so that we can get into the workshop to get into a proper conversation around, so does it do what we want it to do, and what next, and what does it look like, I think equally is a sensible suggestion. But let me open this up in terms of just any immediate high level feedback, views or comments in terms of this. Tanya.
I think just to recognise some of the outcome impact success measures that we can see in this report. I think often in this partnership we tend to focus on the deficits, and the areas for us to improve on, which is absolutely right. We need to constantly drive forward improvement, but must take a moment to kind of look back around what we have achieved over the last few years and find a way to tell our residents of Shropshire about the improvements that as a partnership we have delivered on, and the health of our residents has improved, and the outcomes in so many areas. And I really would like us to think about how we talk about this publicly, because I think it's quite difficult at the moment out there, both for residents and also for professionals. So let's take a moment just to kind of think about how we can kind of talk about this in a.
That's a really important point, and you would fully support that. So then, David, and then Councillor Bantic.
Yeah, you took my piece. I was going to say exactly the same thing. I think it's too easy to focus on the rents, because a lot of those things are generational shifts. You're not going to change them in 2 to 3 years or even 10 years. You're actually going to start the direction of travel to change the direction of the oil tanker. So focus on the successes, not just the ones that haven't shifted.
Really important point, David. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I think this workshop will be extremely important, and the strategy is going to be vital moving forward. I just wonder if there are maybe some particular areas that are important that haven't found their way into these priorities, and whether we could invite members of the board, if there were any, to suggest any that we might include. One that would be, in my thoughts, would be women's health, which, as you know, there are numerous strategies, amongst them the government, but also the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Any other comments on this? And I think Rachel has recognised that this was about bringing this forward, as we said, to take into the workshop, but also just to recognise the progress that's been made in a number of areas. And Tanya and David are both right. So the risk always as you do that, so we're driving for improvement, so let's look at the areas that are red and can we do better. And of course we should be focused on those areas, because that's where we can do better for local residents, for our workforce, and for services that are delivered, but also recognise the progress that's been made in a number of areas as well. Rachel, any final comments? I'm happy to take it.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I will take that forward to the workshop. And I think I probably should have said the other thing in terms of the areas to improve is that there weren't surprises. We were cited on them. I think that's important, but I absolutely agree. We need to focus on the successes. We have achieved a lot. And if you look at the conversation this morning, reflecting on children and people, I think my reflection was, as I said, this strategy, this board took the decision to make that focus. Prior to that, we had not had that level of focus. So that, I mean, that in itself shows the direction. But is there more to do? Of course there is. Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you for that. So we're asked to acknowledge the delivery progress made against the health and wellbeing strategy priorities, with still 2 years remaining, 18 months, 2 years remaining on the strategy, and recommend that we continue to evolve this paper, take it into the workshop, and then bring future reports back to the Health and Wellbeing Board so that we can track progress and delivery against the agreed strategy. I think we're supporting all of those proposals, so thank you for that, colleagues. Moving us on then, so ICB update, papers are in the pack. Claire, anything you want to bring to life in terms of that?
I think there are just 3 things, thank you, Chair, to highlight. Just wanted to pick up the most improved plan care results for staff, most improved in the country. I also wanted to highlight the lung cancer screening programme, which has now started, kicked off in December, but actually we're starting to screen patients now. And then just the final thing is just to make partners aware that the NHS reforms piece is now impacting on the ICB, particularly around the management of change and the voluntary redundancy scheme. So I don't know whether Nigel wanted to say anything about the plan care.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I think it's been an extraordinary amount of hard work. It's underpinned also by diagnostics improvement, as we know. But I know the teams are extraordinarily proud of that work. But I think, you know, if Jo Williams was here, she'd say at every one of those numbers is a patient. And that is exactly what is driving everybody. It's also closely followed by the improvements in cancer.
I was going to pick up the cancer bit and the diagnosis piece with the diagnostics bit, but you're right. And just to follow Tanya's lead from the previous bit, let's recognise and appreciate the progress, because that's making a difference to patient care, patient outcomes, and it's been a drive that we've done collectively absolutely underpinned by hard work, but equally would also say there is more to do. You will have heard me and other NHS Chief Exec colleagues talk repeatedly about our improvement work takes us so far and is really important, but it needs to translate into patients and residents feeling different and experiencing improved care in that space. Bringing waiting lists down is a tangible aspect of that, but you know that we will strive to continue to drive for that improvement across all areas, and there is still work to do, so we're not hiding from that, but we will recognise the progress that's been made with a recommitment to say we can do more and we'll go further in that space. So thank you for that. Any questions or comments on any of that? Oh, okay, I'm going to move us on then. We've got a ship update, which was for information only, so not looking to present or talk about that. And also included for information is the most recent set of papers from the Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Our intention there is to continue to bring that transparency and share and update the papers so that people can see the alignment and what's talked about and what's covered. On that basis, I've not been notified of any other business in advance of the meeting. I'm sitting here slightly nervous that Louisa or Michelle's going to say I've missed something on the agenda in terms of where I've got to, but failing that, then I'm going to bring this meeting to an end if we've covered everything. Everybody feels as though they've had the opportunity to raise the points that they wish, and I'm going to give people some time back in their day. So at 11:10, I'm going to bring this to an end. So thank you for those that joined us online. Thank you for those in the public aspect, and thank you to colleagues for your contributions, input as ever, and have a good day. Thanks all.